And it's over to you, Pablo.
Thank you, Sean. Hi, everybody. First, it's important to define what's artificial intelligence. The problem with the definition is that almost nobody knows what intelligence is. So that's why I rather use the term invented by Alan Turing, a universal machine, a machine devised hopefully to solve all possible problems. That's much clearer than artificial intelligence. And just to clarify, a robot is not the same as an AI. A robot can be a very clever mechanism that does a very complex task, but it doesn't necessarily have an AI. So it's important not to confuse them. Next slide, please. Now, the thing is why it's important. It's important because it's the first science that studies all sciences. When you work in artificial intelligence, you are somehow trying to make a machine that does philosophy, but also behaves like the philosopher, or works with law, but also behaves like a lawyer. So you're trying to work and mimic everything related to the human knowledge and humans themselves. So it's what's called a meta science. And of course, with AI, we can make machines that are able to perform very complex tasks. Everything that can be measured, everything that can be reduced to symbols, it's subject to the study of artificial intelligence. So that's basically almost everything that's in science. Next slide, please. Just to convey an idea of the complexity of the field, this is much more than mathematics, much more than psychology, sociology, economy. We are trying to model human beings. So if you start from the left on this diagram, you see that we are trying to model perception, which allows us to work with the present. Almost everything that's happening now in machine learning and artificial intelligence relates to this. Then with memory, we are able to work with the past. Research now is focusing on memory, how to use the past and mix it up with the present. Also introspection or imagination, because there it's where we plan and we produce alternative futures. So past, present, and future, that's the main focus of machine learning, artificial intelligence right now. But it's a mixed up. Machine learning is just a subfield of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence have existed as a field since 1957. And machine learning, it's a rather new subfield of artificial intelligence, and the two of them are complementing each other. To add to this, you need to add all what's called the a priori knowledge. For example, 2 + 2 = 4. That doesn't depend on our experience. It's true anywhere. To that you add testimony, which is communication between everybody, how to grow knowledge, and finally you need to guide everything with ethics. So that's the most complex thing in artificial intelligence right now, how to mix ethics with these machines. We need machines that are able to behave in an ethical way. You see all the discussions about biasing in companies, gender issues, everything related to those topics is extremely complicated and somehow needs to be reduced to machines. Next slide, please. This is, for those that are going to see the slides later, a description of all the main fields in artificial intelligence, specifically in machine learning. You see lots of names like k-means, k-nearest neighbor, perceptrons, boosting, residual neural networks. Then you have statistical learning of Vapnik and Chervonenkis. Lots of things that are very, very mathematical. This is not like programming where you, for example, you learn Python and you start building up an application. And once you finish, the application will behave as you expected. This is a totally different thing. It's very mathematical, but you need to know about philosophy, about psychology, and mix up everything into something that has to be devised in a process that it's more like alchemy. It's more an art than a system. Next slide, please. Just to clarify things, you have artificial intelligence. Within artificial intelligence, you have machine learning. And within machine learning, you have deep learning, which is what's famous now. And deep learning is using a metaphor, like our brain is composed by neurons, biological neurons. You have a sketch of them on the right side of the screen. Deep learning uses artificial neural networks, which are depicted in the lower diagram. And then you mix up millions of them and you train them. Train them is just to an euphemism to describe a process where you find the parameters that make them work together. Next slide, please. What's important is to understand why this is happening now. Artificial intelligence has existed as a field since 1957. So how come now is making all this buzz? Well, something happened. In 2011, things that were extremely difficult were solved in a matter of months. And 3 months later, things that were thought to belong to science fiction had already been solved. So what happened? This was understood recently, last year, in April 29th. Two researchers from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem discovered that there was a mathematical theorem that explained how to build complex systems out of simple ones. So this explained how we had been able to build such wonderful and complex systems with such easiness. And what's happening now is that everybody is adjusting to this discovery, because this is very important to understand. This is not like a mode, for example, the color of the clothes we use or the type of car we use. That totally depends on our decisions. But when you're based on a mathematical theorem, this is like we've been operating on 2 + 2 = 5, and it was discovered that 2 + 2 = 4. So everybody's switching to 2 + 2 = 4, because if you operate under those grounds, on top of those grounds, you will be safer. So that's explaining the breakthrough we're experiencing. Next slide, please. Just to give you a brief sense of the things that have happened. On the right side of the screen, you have an image that has been labeled by the computer. On the right hand of the image, you see a glass of water with ice and lemon. This was labeled by a computer that had never seen the image before, without human intervention. And this was achieved in 2015, 3 years ago. Now this can be done with video, and they have totally surpassed the human capacity for doing this kind of things. Next slide, please. Here you see how in 2016, a year and a half ago, December 2016, researchers were able to produce fake imagery. So on the right hand of the screen, you again have, for example, flowers. On top of the flower column, you see a text. This is an artificial intelligence that just received the text and produced the bottom flower. So the capacity for producing totally fake images was reached 1.5 years ago, and less than half a year later, the researchers were able to produce totally fake high-definition video that was undistinguishable from the real ones. Next slide, please. In terms of manipulation, things are more complicated, because even though artificial intelligence is ready for handling very complex manipulators, the manipulators as capable as the human hand still don't exist. So we cannot have the same human capacities. Next slide, please. In terms of language, this is sort of a boring example, but it's very impressive. On the right hand of the screen, you see a large paragraph on top of it. But on the bottom part of that column, you see a summary that was produced automatically by an artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence now can understand text, not only translating word by word, but understanding their semantic meaning, so they can produce useful summaries. This is from May 2017, so a year ago. I think it's an example from Salesforce. Next slide, please. This is very simple. This is Google Translate. On the right hand, you see a diagram of the neural network, the deep learning architecture that's handling all the translations. Each of those boxes has thousands of artificial neurons that need to be trained in very complex computers that many times take months of training. Next slide, please. And finally, to summarize the advances, here you see the AlphaZero paper where they show, this is from last year, they show a machine that was able to learn chess and top the best humans in less than 4 hours, which is absolutely impressive. In just 4 hours, being able to dominate the field, the discipline and game that had been developed by humans in thousands of years. The machine automatically discovered most of the main combinations you can learn. It could take, for example, to me, years to learn that kind of things. It only took 4 hours to the machine. Next slide, please. So now what you see on the commercial side, you see all type of AI engines. Everybody's trying to grab a piece of the market. You see TensorFlow from Google, Azure and Lewis from Microsoft, Recognition from Amazon, Watson from IBM, CoreML, Apple, Einstein, Salesforce, the EPU cards of NVIDIA. Many of them are springing up, appearing everywhere, focusing on hardware, different problems, etc., etc. Next slide, please. So in terms of business applications, you see how they're pervading the market. But first, one of the most important ones are personal assistants. And here you see two major players, the Echo and Plus Alexa of Amazon and Google Home from Google. Next slide, please. In terms of the companies, you see two trends: increasing revenue, and here you see the ideas developed at the DSCI, where you have to model the customers, and based on that you measure demand, you forecast demand, you stimulate the demand, and then you control it, you manage it. Next slide, please. And reducing cost. And this is taking mainly the following approach. They're using systems called RPAs, robotic process automations, where you can mix them up with artificial intelligence, and then you're able to process, for example, device machines, processes that are able to handle documents like people in companies. There are three major players: Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, and UiPath. Next slide, please. The problem is the high level of the expectations. We've seen so many movies that we expect everything from artificial intelligence, but now we only have narrow AIs that are able to solve very specific problems. So before you introduce them into a company, you need to have people determine where in the company, then you need people to adapt the artificial intelligence, and then you need people to operate the artificial intelligence. So we are really far, if will be ever possible, to replace all the people. We need hybrid teams. Next slide, please. This is just to exemplify the hybrid teams, an experiment done in 2013 by the Carnegie Mellon University at the Robotics Institute, where they were able to reduce the time needed to weld the chassis of a Humvee from 89 hours to less than a third of the time. And in the 89 hours, they used 3 people, and on the other side, just a computer, an artificial intelligence, a robot, and 1 person. So that's an example. Next slide, please. And that's your time, Sean.
Yes, why don't we stop here and see if we have any questions? Ira, do we have any?
No, we don't have any questions yet, but let me remind people that the Q&A function is available. If you have questions for Pablo or Sean, just write it in that feature, and we will come there and pull out your question and ask Sean and Pablo.
Okay, we'll give it just a minute here, see if any questions come in.
I have a question for Pablo since we're waiting for others to enter. Pablo, are there any issues with standards in the AI field that we will need to see companies hash out?
That's a very good question, because now there is a huge fight between the companies that are building the AI engines, and each of them is pushing for their own systems, trying to make them the standards. It's very complicated from our side, companies, because now we're in a scenario where we have to use all of them.
Mm-hmm.
There are no standards yet.
Very good. All right, we have two questions here, and Wanakai Lee asks, how are AI and ML related to the supply chain? And I'll ask a follow-up. Dimitri also asked a similar question. Do we have some examples of application in supply chain management?
Pablo, would you like to take that one and talk about what Anastasia is seeing as you talk to your customers?
Sure, definitely. For example, what we're seeing here in Latin America is that with artificial intelligence, you can measure, forecast the behavior of the customers and predict it. So immediately you can start using the results to manage the entire supply chain. It's very, very interesting because normally companies have not thought about this in these ways. But with this, we are able to forecast the demand of people, the customers, and also the demand from the supplier point of view. So definitely, unless you're able to, you need to build these very detailed, very precise artificial intelligence models of the dynamics of the companies in order to correctly manage the supply chain.
Good. All right, Sean, why don't we continue there, and as the other questions come in, we'll get to them at the end of the session.
Okay, all right, we can do that. Although I see, let's answer Greg's question here. He's asking, are RPA tools using AI, which is doable today?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm seeing that here in Latin America. I see that people are implementing RPAs and adding artificial intelligence to handle, for example, documents. They receive a document, the RPA extracts the information that goes through artificial intelligence that takes decisions concerning the process. So yeah, definitely, that's a yes.
All right, Sean, do you want to take this next question?
Yes.
From Raj?
Let me, before we do that, let me add to Greg's RPA question, in that I recently saw a demo by Budweiser where they use RPA to manage the last minute loading of their trucks when they have an order cancellation and they're looking to backfill a shipment. They what used to be very much of a manual process, they have now implemented an RPA solution that enables them with a high degree of probability to fill the space in the truck with what will likely be ordered while the truck is in transit. So that, I thought that was a pretty good example. All right, let's move on here, because I think there'll be some more questions coming up on a future slide here. But summarizing what Pablo had to say about AI and what it is and how it's being used and what the state of the art is. Really, you need to think about outcomes that you want to be focused on. Are you talking about automation? Are you talking about augmentation of an existing process? What is the right solution? What is the right platform for implementing that? We talked about the 4 V's, the last being veracity. As you embark down the artificial intelligence and augmented machine learning, start with good data. Start with data that you've got a high degree of confidence in, high veracity seed data, that a relatively clean data set, and make sure you've got consistent feeds and downstream supply visibility, so that as you improve your machine learning algorithms, as you improve your business models, that you're going against a relatively clean data set to start with, so that you can start recognizing the anomalies in the data going forward. And many of the platforms can assist you with that, but it's important to start with a data set that you know is relatively clean. And then, of course, we talked about the human interaction, reinforcing learning models, feeding the machine learning algorithms, adjusting for your business changes. If you don't know what vector autoregression is today, you probably will sometime in the near future, because it's certainly an important tool for correlating data in optimizing the machine learning algorithms. Keys to effective implementation: operationalize one process at a time. As Pablo said, most of the use cases that are out there today that are generally available are specialized. They're narrow AI cases. Look at your process, your workflow. Experiment one use case at a time. As you find ones that are valuable to your business, then continue to improve those. And continue to take advantage of the data that's out there. Leverage the platforms. This gets into an interesting conversation, in that with AI and the various platforms that are out there, with machine learning and the various platforms that are out there, with deep learning capabilities. There's a lot of tools that a lot of companies have spent a whole lot of time making investments in. Think about where, as a company, your competitive advantage comes from, because that's what's important, and that's really in how you use these tools, the algorithms that you create, how you feed them. There are also open algorithm sources out there today. I was talking to one of the members not too long ago, and their view was that the algorithms are a commodity. I don't necessarily share that view. Their view was what's important is the weighting that you give to the data that feeds the models. But certainly, as you move into the AI platforms and the machine learning platforms, those are things that are out there. People are making investments in. Take advantage of them. That's probably not where you're going to get your competitive advantage from. You don't need to be writing the AI platform, and you probably don't need an army of data scientists to do that. Pablo is a data scientist. He's from Chile. It's a fairly progressive country. Pablo is one of a handful of data scientists with a PhD in Chile. So those folks are scarce. They're going to be leveraged across multiple companies, such as what Pablo does. And so think about where you're going to derive your competitive advantage from, and how you're going to make use of the investments that others are making. Expectations are high. We mentioned that it's early in the adoption cycle at this point, but tremendous gains are being made very rapidly, as Pablo showed during his presentation. As he said, this was 3 years ago, this was 2 years ago, this is where we are today. Major inroads are being made very quickly. Next slide, please. So the Institute published a paper, I believe, back in March, talking about AI and machine machine learning and how that will apply to and affect your supply chain. It's a well-written paper, if I do say so myself, and it's got a lot of good and valuable information in it. I would direct you to the Institute's website. If you haven't downloaded and read the paper, read it, please. I think you'll find it very valuable. But a number of things that we came up with was our top 10 list. You know, what are the top 10 ways that AI and ML is going to transform your supply chain? Now, first of all is data, the 80-20 rule. You know, today your data scientists are spending the majority of their time doing the things that are least satisfying to them and probably not a productive use of their time, which is cleansing data. So we got to reverse this. Instead of them spending 80% of their time trying to come up with high veracity data, need to take advantage of the machine learning tools that are out there and reverse that so that they're spending 20% of their time teaching the algorithms how to evaluate data and dealing with the anomalies rather than the 80% that they're doing today, and that they're spending and that they flip to spending the majority of their time on assessing the data and figuring out how it impacts your business model. You got the ability now as a result of the data and the information feeds to do real-time demand simulation, targeted advertising. You can do dynamic pricing, much as the airlines do today. You can change the price of your goods and services based on the demand that you're seeing out there. As you analyze your data, you're going to find new product opportunities. You're going to find some surprises. And deal with those surprises. Generally, it's good information. You may want to adjust the way that you market. You may want to adjust your supply chain. You may want to target a new product. But that's the capability that you have in the digital world as you transform your business. The data visibility will reduce your risk. Algorithms are important. You know, no bones about it. That's where the battle is going to be in the future. You're going to need an algorithm console or some sort of governance structure to deal cross business units, cross business processes to ensure that you're taking a holistic view of your business and adapting your models as you digitize your business models and discover changes that can be made. You have to prioritize that. You have to adapt your business models. You have to ensure that you're prioritizing the information in the correct way, and that'll become increasingly important. And then we haven't talked about it yet. I think we will in the next session. But all this will drive changes in the skill sets that you need. Those people that you have on board today will have to change and adapt their talents, and you're going to need some new skills. You're going to need a Pablo or two. You're going to need a data scientist. You're going to need somebody who is skilled in managing the day-to-day information flows. Next slide, please. So really, you're going to see an intersection between your supply chain specialists, your data scientists. This is what next week's session's all about. You're going to have to look at organizational impacts. Do you put your data scientists, your data information specialists, do you put them in the business units? Do you organize them centrally? Do you create if they're in the business units, how do you create a community cross business units of the data scientists that allow you to leverage best practices and exchange ideas amongst them? How do you integrate the new skills with the old skills, and find that intersection that enables you to optimize your HR performance? So challenges to think about. Next week's session is all about this, and we'll go into a lot of detail. Before we move on to the to the closing comments. Let's take a look and see if we got more questions here that we might want to talk about.
All right. Let's see. Raj asks, what is the spectrum range of applications starting from business intelligence to cognitive computing in the context of supply chain?
Okay, that sounds like a master's class.
Yeah.
That's a broad question.
Yes, very broad question. Pablo, you want to take a crack?
For example, what I'm seeing in the market are recommendation engines from the business intelligence side. For example, demand forecast as well. And on the other side, cognitive computing, you see everything that's related to personal assistance and handling human language. I don't know. I guess we can talk about this for hours. This is such a cool question.
Yes, we could. Let me ask a slightly different question, Pablo. Pablo works for an AI firm called Anastasia, and he has a lot of commercial interaction with clients around Latin America, Chile, Argentina, Mexico. When you go out and talk to your clients, Pablo, what are the things that they are most interested in hearing about in learning how to apply to their business?
Well, that's interesting. The first thing they're secretly hoping is to have a sort of a useful Terminator that solves everything. They've seen too many movies, like all of us. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the language is universal. They want to increase revenue and they want to decrease costs. So if you somehow translate the technology, artificial intelligence into that, all of us are talking the same language. So now, for example, concerning a recommendation engine we are running for an important company in Latin America, we managed to get a 20% increase in the revenue in the channels where the artificial intelligence is operating. That's the kind of things they want to listen to. But this is important because we have to work hard in order to produce numbers, because if not, it turns into a political thing and ends up in I believe you or I don't believe you. So they want to have numbers, objective numbers that have been measured, so they can prove that whatever technology, in this case artificial intelligence, is useful for them. So that's the kind of things they want to hear.
Yeah, it really is proof of value once again. Folks aren't interested in proof of concepts. They want to know what the value is that can be delivered from a project or a use case.
Yep.
Pablo and Sean, I have a follow-up question that I want to ask. And as you look at artificial intelligence and machine learning and you apply it to the supply chain, what do you see specific jobs, functions, tasks being automated? And the flip side of that, do you see new roles being created?
Yeah. On my side, I see, well, first the simple ones, not simple, but sort of obvious, is that you need people that know more about artificial intelligence, but not the details, but how to use them, to understand basically the limitations and to understand how to use them as a Lego brick to assemble more complex things in the company. Then another field would be people that map typical processes into these new ones where you get these hybrid schemes with artificial intelligence and people working together. So we'll need that type of people, and companies are not used to thinking those ways. Mm-hmm. I agree with the idea of the algorithm council, because now companies are used to handling groups of people, and technology that's fairly simple compared to this one. because this one is autonomous and it's handling very complex things. So you need a different type of management. Also, you need people that sees the companies in a horizontal way, because these machines interact with the customer, immediately create a marketing campaign directed toward the customer, then go to the logistics section, operational section of the company, and check for the stock, for example. So they cut through all the silos, the internal silos. So it will be, there is a need for people that also looks at companies in horizontal ways. Yeah, I think that would be it.
Okay, and Pablo, we've got another question here that that I think you've partially addressed in your discussion here, but Greg Millen is asking, what's our view of how AI evolves over time? Will it replace humans as Jack Ma spoke about, or will it augment humans as Ginny Rometty at IBM talks about? What's your view?
I've been reading a lot about that in the last years. Nobody's certain about what's going to happen, but I think we humans are much more complicated in some senses than what we know, and in other senses we are much simpler. So some important aspects of the society are going to be replaced by machines, and I don't think others are going to be replaced by machines. Creativity could be. Yeah, true, a machine cannot behave like a Picasso, but definitely much better than myself. I am not an artist. So normally we tend to compare machines with the best humans in a certain field. But the problem is that all the rest are not the best humans in that field, so we could be replaced by a machine. So that brings interesting problems, like the question is posing. Yeah, it's still an open problem, I guess. But we're headed for a big change. That's my bet.
Yes, it really gets back to the discussion on automation versus augmentation and how that changes over time. You know, certainly the automation bucket is going to grow dramatically. The need for augmentation is going to become higher level, I think, and more specialized over time.
Yeah.
Why don't we move on to the closing slide here? So some closing comments here, and Pablo, let's do this interactively if we could. You know, I think that AI and, you know, hopefully what we've shown today is that AI and machine learning capabilities are really essential to your digital transformation. It's the only way you're going to leverage the data and the sources that are out there today, make sense out of it. And humans can't do things nearly as quickly or find the same patterns that properly focused algorithms can. Consider consider your business models. You're going to find some surprises. You're going to find probably many surprises, and you may find new markets. You may find new products that fill gaps. But you know, one thing I can guarantee is that as you organize and make sense of the available data that's out there using artificial intelligence tools, you will find some surprises, and you'll need to adapt to it before your competition does.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm a big believer of strategies. You know, you got to have a strategy. You got to have a roadmap. You've got to have your preferred tools, and you got to consider how you're going to organize initially, and then how that organization evolves over time as your skills change. Obviously,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I would like to complement with something. Is that concerning strategy? For example, if you see the strategies of Google, Facebook, all the big ones, Amazon, yeah, they have sorted out very interesting strategies, but they still don't get it. It's even difficult for them. So if you don't have a strategy, you will be totally lost. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Thank you. And then algorithms are going to become a source of differentiation. It's not the AI and the ML tools that are going to differentiate you. It's going to be how you use them, how you apply the algorithms, how you correlate your information to your business model and assess the priorities and the impacts. Which means that algorithm consoles or some form of governance is going to be necessary. We call it an algorithm console. I think it's a good name, but it's going to become standard practice. Pablo, closing comments?
Yeah, I like the idea of the algorithm council as well. It's a new way of integrating all of this. And I think there won't be other way. And we are seeing these type of changes starting to happen here in Latin America as well. So that validates it. They have given them different names, but they're heading towards the same structures. Yeah, I agree.
Pablo, I'd like to thank you for participating with me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, it's been a pleasure as well.
Look forward to continue to work together. Back to you, Ira.
Thank you. And I'll add my thanks, Pablo. We really appreciate your time and your participation in this program. And Sean, again, thank you. A wonderful program. And I want to thank our audience too. And as I said at the beginning, on July 10th, at this day and time, again, we will have our 5th Expert Connect series, and we will be looking at talent strategy. Again, thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.